So the reason America's history is so important, it's because it's biblically important. It's the continuation of the book of Samuel. It is. So when all those media people say it's not really a Christian nation, it wasn't founded on that. No, there's tons of evidence for it. But it is. It's a continuation of the book of Samuel. That's the reason America is America. So you're blessed to be here. It doesn't look like it right now, but that's because we don't have people that are building a relationship with God. That's very important. I've been saying for a while now, the 1776 founders, not that they weren't any good or anything, but they believed in God, but they were kind of all over the place with their faith. Okay? They didn't have that personal relationship. The Pilgrims, I could tell by the fearlessness they had, and the way they set up the government, because they set up the government because of what happened in the book of Samuel. And what happened, which is in the Old Testament, what happened in the book of Samuel was Israel was, they had this, because the way it worked, this is why it's the continuation story with the Pilgrims, is God did not want them to have a king. They were a congregation of people, of God's people, and they had a prophet that led them, a shepherd. And that shepherd would go on and appoint kings sometimes. So, or not kings, no kings, judges, judges would appoint judges. So something happened with Samuel was a good shepherd, good in God's eyes, and they had battles that they didn't even have to fight because God protected the land. That's what he does. He's better than the military-industrial complex. He blows them away, obviously. But they would win battles they didn't even have to fight because God was protecting them. So, but there's these gaps where you have like 2 generations that go by. And so things are forgotten. And so the people come to Samuel's getting older, and so they come to Samuel and say, "You're getting old. We want to have a king over us." Well, that's an insult to God because he's the king. So that's number one. That's an insult. And so and Samuel knew that what God would think of that, but he prayed about it, and God said, "Go and tell them this." Basically, that if you have a king over you, you will go right back to bondage. And and the reason they wanted a king was they wanted to be like all the other nations, to have a visible king over them. So taking on the cultures of those other nations, that's not what God wanted. So that's very significant to our pilgrims, because our pilgrims, I've said, they were filled with the Holy Spirit. There's a difference between believing in God and knowing God. Knowing God is being filled with the Holy Spirit. So, there's a book in the archives. This is the book, The Story of Liberty. And most of it is all England, okay? But it's all the religious sects that were not having it with the Pope. Because the Pope was telling everybody, no, you listen to me. I'm the right hand of God. Yeah. So that's the reason why all the religious, it's Holy Roman Empire, because this was back in like 1066. So a ton of Christians from, whether it was the Quakers or the Puritans, whatever, they knew that, no, they were filled with the Holy Spirit. They knew that this was totally wrong. So then they came here. The very last chapter of this book is called Plymouth, which is where the Mayflower ended up. Some of the pilgrims went, obviously, to Pennsylvania, but the Mayflower went to Massachusetts. The Mayflower went on to set up a government based on what God wanted. And they was never to be kings, because they knew that insulted God. And it was to be limited, because really they came over just the way that God wanted them. They were a congregation of people with a shepherd. Usually, whether it was William Bradford, it was actually somebody higher than William Bradford. I forget his name. But basically, that's what they had. They were a congregation of people. That's why people have heard, or maybe have heard, people say that America, even though, yes, we're open to different things, our Constitution, the way it is, was written for a certain type of people. A faith-based type of people, but not just, oh, I believe in God, but people that are filled with the Holy Spirit, like the Pilgrims, because they knew how to set up the government. They knew that it had to be the most limited amount of government because the people had the power, and less government meant more freedom. That should be obvious, right? So when you hear these socialists come along, realize something, and they make their great claims, because I work in nursing. I've seen all the damn papers the past, forever, that they write about, we need to help this class and we need to help this group and this group. The best way they could help is stop being socialists and be about freedom and less government. But no, they go lobby. So see, the reason you have homelessness and you have all these problems is because you have a nation full of people that aren't filled with the Holy Spirit. It's the truth. It's the truth. We're lucky that we've been protected the way we have by God and prospered so much. But this nation would be like milk and honey, like no homeless. It could be beautiful. I mean, it's obviously not beautiful now, but beyond, where you don't need all these lobbyists, because you don't have this homeless problem. But what happens is when you have a nation that just goes to church on Sunday, and many people just fall asleep in church, but even that, they're not trying to build a relationship with God, then what happens is you get more agencies, more agencies, more agencies. Look at how many associations, agencies, all these people that determine that it's totally against what the Pilgrims wanted, but it's because of the people. This is the reason the Pope wanted to be the main person and saying, nope, you can't do this, you can't do that, I will appoint emperors, because what was he trying to keep them from? Every Pope didn't want you to know the Holy Spirit, because if enough people knew the Holy Spirit, well, God would make your land heaven. It's true. Pilgrims knew it. People in the Old Testament knew it. But people have to be willing to receive that. Part of what our Pilgrims believed when it came to freedom was having enough biblical maturity that you knew when freedom meant, no, you shouldn't do this. Like, freedom didn't just mean yes to everything and let's be irresponsible like drag queens in the kindergarten classroom. That's irresponsible freedom. But look at all of these higher educated people. Oh, it's about diversity. Irresponsible diversity in every single way. Not about freedom, irresponsible. But they're immature biblically. I mean, they're not even immature, they're just dead biblically, because I don't think many of the higher educated even consider God ever, but our Pilgrims did. They were way smarter. So anyway, so this was basically the way the Pope saw himself. You can tell with the hat. But it says down here that he would appoint all emperors. So obviously those people in England that were filled with the Holy Spirit, many of them that came here, that would just be a red flag. It should be to anybody, but to them especially, okay? Because obviously at some point in their history, that Holy Spirit, I said before, it spread from the time Jesus went away and had given it to the disciples or apostles, and then it spread to everybody. I mean, it spread. That was what the teacher was. And this was on the Mayflower. You can even look at that, was the first contract, basically a covenant, compact. It was the compact. So that's what's missing. Like, America would not have all the problems it does. We wouldn't need all these lobbyists, but people that want to keep you in bondage, they don't want you to know the Holy Spirit. They want you to focus on all this government that's going to tell you what's best for you, and look at how much it's failed. The best thing is when the people have the power, because they know best, especially when they have a relationship with God, they know best how to navigate in a biblically responsible way. That's how you have freedom. You start with depending on God.